Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending my Capstone Symposium presentation. My name is Abigayle Carino, and I did my internship with NOAA Fisheries and the Alaska Fisheries Science Center Marine Mammal Laboratory. My project is entitled The Complexity of Inequity, Investigating Accessibility to Environmental Education Resources for Underrepresented Students. My site supervisors were Katie Luxa, Lisa Haruki-Raring, and Erin Moreland, and my faculty advisor was Lubna Al-Saru. To set you up with some background for my project, I focused on environmental education and outreach and how it is so important for students to gain an understanding of the natural world. I focused primarily on Alaska and Washington as they are some of the most environmentally expansive and diverse states, and their school districts vary in the environmental education curriculum and programs taught. Underrepresented students, like youth from different multiracial, ethnic, or low-income backgrounds, run the risk of limits to environmental education opportunities in public schools. I also found that schools need to increase equitable access to environmental education resources as a whole. For my research questions, I asked, are public schools in Alaska and Washington providing environmental education for underrepresented students? And what can be done to improve accessibility to environmental education resources in public schools? Like I mentioned before, I worked with NOAA Fisheries and the Alaska Fisheries Science Center Marine Mammal Laboratory, and in doing so, I took inventory of all marine mammal education outreach materials available for the public. You can see that on Figure 1 on the right-hand side. I also worked to update outreach totes for the Marine Mammal Lab's Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Juneau, and helped to create resin blocks that contain marine mammal specimens, which you can see in Figure 2 on the bottom. That one contains whale lice. For my individual research, I conducted a qualitative and anonymous survey of superintendents of public schools in Washington and Alaska, which you can see an example of the type of question I asked in the results section, which I will talk a bit more about. And I also conducted interviews with NOAA scientists and NOAA education and outreach specialists on environmental education as a whole. For the results section in my survey response, I found that Washington public schools, about 46% of superintendents agree that they serve students from a lower income community, where 61% of superintendents agreed with the claim that students would be able to identify a current environmental concern. For Alaska public schools, I found that 80% of superintendents agreed that they serve students from a lower income community, where only 30% of superintendents agreed that students would be able to identify a current environmental concern. 48% of superintendents in Washington and Alaska agreed that they served a large number of underserved students. Below that, you can see one question that I asked. This question was, does your school district offer curriculum teaching in more than one language? On the far right-hand side of the bar graph, you can see about 45.2% strongly disagreed with this statement. This is really important because I contacted all superintendents in Washington and Alaska of public schools, which means that a lot of these schools service districts where students don't speak English as a first language, districts that maybe cater to a tribal community, and all of these other important aspects that would make it seem as though curriculum should be offered in more than just one language. For the interview response section, when talking to NOAA education and outreach specialists, I found that environmental education in academia varies based on region in Alaska and Washington and what is readily available in the environment around the community. I also found that environmental teaching and practice should be sustainable because you should be able to offer the students in this community something that they can maintain for years at a time. I also learned that environmental agencies have the opportunity to prioritize audiences based on discrepancies in socioeconomic status. Two quotes that I pulled from these interviews that I feel like really sum up the importance of equitable environmental teaching are these. The first one is, we have the opportunity to work to make sure lessons are place-based so that they're culturally responsive, so that they are really looking at the student as a whole. The second one is, these kids live in communities where they have like the coolest natural laboratory right there in their backyard. Why not use that as a classroom? For my project, I came up with 4 key takeaways. The first one is that environmental education accessibility varies widely in Alaska and Washington, depending on place-based opportunities. The second one is that students that attend schools that service a lower income community are less likely to have exposure to environmental education teaching. Third, I found that outreach and education opportunities by environmental agencies are often largely dependent on public inquiry. And lastly, materials may be made more accessible through language translation or other functions with funding and community partnerships. For the broader implications of my project, I found that public school administrators and environmental agencies have the opportunity to address the inequities in environmental education accessibility through numerous factors. I created a 6-factor model that talks through public school administrators and what they can do to help aid with environmental education accessibility, as well as environmental agencies and what they can do to help. For public school administrators, they can work on emphasizing place-based learning in the outdoor classroom, especially for districts where they may not have funding to have programs on their own. They can look into ways to incorporate environmental teaching in the environment directly surrounding their schools. They can also work to incorporate some environmental specialists into addressing curriculum that focuses on current research methodologies. They can also help to allocate funding and time to curriculum translation. And for environmental agencies, they can advertise the education and materials that they have available to schools. They can help to prioritize audiences based on need and diversify environmental leader representation so underrepresented students can see people in positions of leadership to look up to in environmental education. When all of these factors are taken into consideration, students will develop a well-rounded perspective of the environment and will be more likely to pursue a career in environmental education and understand important environmental concepts like climate change. For my acknowledgements, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to my site supervisors, Katie, Lisa, and Aaron, and to my faculty advisor, Lubna, and to my co-intern, Britt, for their support and insight throughout this entire capstone process. I would like to thank the NOAA Education Outreach Specialists that took the time to interview with me, alongside the superintendents in Washington and Alaska that filled out my survey. And lastly, I would like to thank my mom and dad and brother, as their endless support and encouragement has always made me feel capable of anything I put my mind to. Thank you.